Oh yeah, we're getting off. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Robotics Assemble podcast, hosted by CNC Robotics. My name is Megnat, and I'll be your host today. Today with me, I have Julie and Mihir, who are from mechanical and programming sub-teams, respectively. And today's episode is all about the Minibot. What is a Minibot? You'll hear a lot more as we talk about it today. You'll get a lot of answers, a lot of your questions answered. So no need to worry. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. So Julie, if you want to go ahead and just talk about what you do on the team, what are your interests, and all that. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Julie. I'm a part of the mechanical team. I've worked on the Soul Circ, or one of them, the curriculum for the mechanical engineering part, and I also spend a lot of time watching Pro League of Legends and listening to all kinds of music.
You here?
Hello, my name is Mihir. I'm on the programming team. I've also worked on the Soul and Circ programs here at in the Lake St. Tobias, and I also love listening to music and probably like watching TV shows is probably another hobby of mine.
Good interest. I guess I'm just gonna start off with a random question because I was like when Nikhil did it in previous episodes. So I guess I would ask both of you guys, what's your if you had to choose three songs, if you're stuck on an island, what three would the three songs be?
I guess I'll start off. There's one song that my favorite Dead by Daylight YouTuber plays at his outro every time. It's called 22 by Abstract featuring Delaney, and it's got really nice beats. And then there's also Figured You Out by Voila. It's got also really nice beats, but it's also got pretty hard-hitting lyrics. And after that, it would probably be just a random K-pop song.
Okay. You here?
For me, if I were stuck on an island, I would probably listen to maybe All Night by Icona Pop. That would be a pretty good island song.
Mm-hmm.
What else would I want to have? I would probably have. I'm blanking on the songs that I know. There's a one that my friend recently introduced to me called Majestic Flight by Fro's Studio Chamber Sonic. That'd probably be a good island song in the part of your world because that song's really good.
Nice. Oh, that's great. Yeah, I was thinking of songs that I would take an island with me. I don't have any off the top of my head. But thankfully, since I'm the host, I don't have to answer it. But I'm mostly into things like 1990s rock pop, or just 2000s rap, things like that. But yeah, I guess we'll start talking about kind of what our main segment is about. It's about the mini bot. So just a kind of bit of context for all the listeners. The mini bot is basically this off-season project that our programming, mechanical, CAD teams have all kind of been working on, and it's like it's basically what the name implies. It's a smaller robot, largely allowed to give our team experience, with working with robots and building, as well as giving us something to use to learn how to how to use the swerve drive system. So I guess the first question I'll kind of go with is kind of what was the original idea or motive behind building the Minibot? I know I kind of covered it a little bit, but are there any specifics that why we decided to build a Minibot specifically rather than doing other smaller tutorials?
Specifically for the mechanical team, I know because there's COVID, the interest and the allure of the mechanical team for the more newer members is pretty much gone because most people don't hear, oh, we're gonna CAD and think that's awesome. So what the mini bot's supposed to be doing is allowing for the kind of in between year that COVID's created for more newer members to not only understand the building process, but also kind of keep everyone else quote unquote in shape when it comes to the knowledge.
Yeah, and so for the programming part, I know that we hope to use the Minibot to practice programming in general, especially in years we have issues with getting the bot ready for programming to finish because we still need to build a competition bot. So we're hoping to use the Minibot as like a practice bot while we're getting the actual competition bots ready.
Okay, so I guess obviously my first question is, I mean, with mechanical, obviously there is a difference between building a full size robot versus a mini bot. But how are you guys kind of planning to, how are you keeping people like freshmen and new members interested, especially when they can't handle the parts that, have that tangible feel of things?
I think the satisfaction of completing a CADing project at first is pretty much non-existent. But after you've gone through the entire CAD course and then you've
Hmm.
CADed a robot, you feel another like quote unquote level of satisfaction or a whole new feel like, oh, I've actually done something. Yeah, I haven't held something, but I've spent hours staring at a screen, clicking my mouse, and constantly pressing Control Z.
Interesting. So have you guys what's kind of been your approach to teaching a lot of these new members CAD? Because I know most middle schoolers don't really learn about CAD, right? So, how are you guys approaching that, especially online?
So there's a CADing course provided by Onshape after they finish that, which basically covers like the basics of how to CAD and then how to organize your files, etc.
Hmm.
Our CAD lead would essentially give us projects. He had these videos that he found from other FRC teams, which
Hmm.
had them essentially CADing out a robot, and then he'd have us CAD along with it. First, we started with a West Coast drivetrain, then we moved on to a different intake from a team, and then he made us do like basically 2D sketching of how to pre-design a robot.
Interesting. Yeah, I've definitely heard a lot about these drivetrains, and I think that's one of the questions I'll ask a little later is, about swerve and all that. But that's really cool. I do remember Onshape. I remember when Nikhil was on the show. I want to say 3 or 4 episodes back. They were ranting about Onshape versus all the other programs, and they have an opinion. I don't know personally. I don't care, but apparently Onshape's just the way to go.
Yeah, I think like Onshape being online is easier, and then compared to Fusion 360, which is pretty much the only other one I've had extensive experience
Hmm.
with, it's much easier. And then you have like SolidWorks, which is basically the equivalent of god tier use, but it's really hard to get into. So I think Onshape's pretty good.
Okay, yeah, that's reasonable. So yeah, kind of shifting over to the programming side, I know that last year I was in programming. One of the things that we really wanted to do was, how do we allow programmers to take their work and apply it to a more physical object? So I was wondering that, there is a mini bot, but um, are you guys planning to code the mini bot like specifically? Is that how do I say this? Is your final goal to code the mini bot, or are you guys also looking into other things like simulation programs? I know that was one of the considerations last year, right? In order to get more people kind of uh, be able to like actually run their code, right? What's kind of like the approach on that?
Yeah, so we're mainly working on the mini bot, especially because we have so many new members this year, which is really wonderful.
Hmm.
But like one of the problems with like so many new members is that we don't have as much experience with FRC coding, and it's a little bit different from like technical experience. So we're focusing on the mini bot, but we do have a couple of other teams working on stuff like vision, which we're going to be needing, and then also yeah, so the simulation as well.
Right, and so I've heard you guys were also I don't know, I mean the programming lead. He was looking into using Raspberry Pis for vision. Is that something we're gonna looking at implementing on the mini bot, or is it something it's more like a future for a full size robot plan?
Yeah, so I believe the Raspberry Pis are for like a future more thing. We don't have any plans with integrating it into the Minibot code right now. We have like separate code running for that, but we are exploring that option.
Interesting. Yeah, and I guess a similar question. Has it been harder to kind of convince freshmen and new members to kind of stay interested when there isn't a physical robot, or does the allure of programming itself just make it worth it to stay on the sub team?
I think that there's a little bit of both. I feel like there's a little bit of there isn't as much physical experience with not just with the robot but with each other,
Hmm.
and it's been really hard with that, like getting the new members like involved with like the team and the dynamic. But then once we do, there is this like, oh, I'm programming something that will be used at some point.
Right. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And that's just another question for programming before I move on to the next question is I know for mechanical I can imagine you would CAD, you have each person kind of CAD a different part. you could possibly give freshmen some of the simpler parts, things like that. But for programming, how are you guys, splitting up the work, but also making sure the freshmen don't feel, left behind or burdened down with a lot of work, right? So I know that online it can be sometimes hard to mentor because you can't take, a student aside and just talk to them. So how are you guys kind of working through that?
Yeah, so what we're doing is we're splitting up our sub team into multiple different segments with one experienced person from last year, and the rest of the members are new members, so that the experienced member is there to help guide the new members, but the new members are mainly the ones who are working on the code and leading everyone in like a team that will create their own version of the Minibot code.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's yeah, really cool. And I guess kind of shift from that. When my next question was, is there any kind of new or innovative or risk-taking design elements that are being implemented on the mini bot that maybe we'll see in future years, or is it more of a back to basics, very simple approach? And it's really for either one of you guys to answer.
From the mechanical side, I feel that the Minibot actually is a return to what we technically should be doing during the regular season, since I didn't personally get to work on the CAD for our last year's bot, but I did see the files, and the bot technically wasn't complete when it came to the CAD. Meanwhile, the mini bot is pretty much fully CADed out. We can import a few swerves that are pre-CADed if we wanted to like flesh out the very details, which kind of shows that hey, if you CAD everything out, it becomes a whole lot more simple. And I think it's a kind of clap back to reality that we need to CAD everything out to make sure that we don't have to do trial and error.
So it's just been I mean, I've only been on the year. Sorry, on the team. This is my second year here. Do you think this is kind of not a culture, but um, there isn't the idea of fully CADing everything out? Do you feel like people usually try to CAD until you get it and then start building? Is that an issue that's kind of come up every year, or do you think that's something that's just specifically for last year?
I think it last year, like I've seen two of the year's robots, and I think the
Hmm.
first year's robot kind of shows that it might have been fully carried out. I don't know, but it felt like there were a few design aspects that would have been seen in CAD that was not seen. So I feel like these bots weren't fully carried out. It's much less of like a culture of laziness, but it's much more of like a culture of we're pretty much like family in the mechanical section. So
Hmm.
pointing out faults or errors kind of becomes hard.
Gotcha. And well, what was the first robot? Is that Opportunity?
Uh, yeah, I think.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I've definitely, seen some of the issues with Opportunity. I believe it wears a dunce cap now in the corner of our corner of Ivanhoe. So, that's as much as you need to know. But I guess kind of just connecting onto it. So, do you guys think that making a mini bot would be something that we kind of implement every year, or how do we be looking at the mini bot? Is it just like a quarantine project, or is it something that could actually help incoming students every year?
On the mechanical side, I don't think catting a mini bot every year would be the most interesting or the most helpful, given that
Hmm.
Ivanhoe only has so much space. We're not going to build a mini bot every year, and then like
Hmm.
it's going to end up being the same. What I do feel like though is it's a good project for students to have in the future. It's like
Hmm.
if you want to learn how to CAD, first we'll teach you how to go through the on-chip course, then you'll CAD the West Coast drive, then you'll CAD the intake, and then you'll CAD a mini bot.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Good.
and on the programming side, I definitely agree with Julie where we aren't necessarily going to be coding a new Minibot every year. I feel like we're going to be using the Minibot code and then like guiding the freshmen through like making that, and then also like expanding on the Minibot a little bit every year to like create a more complicated code where we can code like do things a lot more efficiently.
Hmm. So, I mean, yeah, I guess same question also applies to the programming side. Are there any specific risks that you guys have been taking for the mini bot, or is it just a very simple, toned down approach to programming it?
Yes, so right now we're doing a very simple toned down version,
Hmm.
but we're encouraged to explore new opportunities that we might have not included in last year's code, or in previous year's code if it foresees or like if we see like an opportunity to code that. But right now we're just trying to code a basic Minibot code so that everyone has a baseline understanding of the code.
Right, and so I remember last year we used like commands and subsystems, right, to kind of interact between the motors and just the different elements. So, uh, is that changing this year, or is it staying the same? And then if it's changing, are you guys using the mini bot kind of as an opportunity to let everyone kind of learn it? Because I know even experienced people might have to kind of change the way they think.
Yeah, so we're still using the same subsystem command system as last year
Hmm.
with WPI, but I feel like we're incorporating it a lot differently because last year's code, there was a lot of things that were interacting where they shouldn't have. And now that we're starting from scratch and we have the time to do that, we're able to make those changes, decide what should actually be interacting with what and what should have power to call certain functions.
Interesting. Yeah, I do remember like issues with abstractions and all that was definitely one of the issues we had last year. And then when you started going into those really complex multi-tiered applications, that it becomes quite a hassle to end up actually being able to fix it. Um, so I guess just kind of shifting away from that, how is obviously you guys are both kind of more experienced members on the team. Uh, I believe have you guys both been here for 2 years now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, 2 years. So, how does has I mean, I guess this is not a very difficult question to answer. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but how has being a leader, now that you're a little bit more experienced, been different from your first year, your freshman year experience, especially now you're a leader online. That has its own issues, right? And I've seen it myself as well. So, we maybe want to reflect on that experience.
Um, Online, I feel like it's removed a lot of the community aspect that we used to have because
Mm,
I do know for a fact that we used to banter a lot, and then there was a kind of vibe to it where people would just like, hey, we have to work on the bot now and we can't focus as well. Now that everything's online, I feel that people can find their focus easier, especially since it's like, yo, you have to get this amount of work done by this time, and then everyone goes ahead and does that. But in the same right, even though we're more effective now, we've lost the community feel that I'm pretty sure Shrey talked about that they tried to nurture in the 2018 year. So there's a trade off.
right. Let me hear if you want to, also comment on an experience you've had.
Yeah, I definitely agree. We've lost a lot of the community aspect, and not just within our specific sub teams, but our general team as well. Like we used to have potlucks every Friday where we would just take a break from working on the robot and working on productive stuff, and then just bond as a community with our mentors and within ourselves as well. And we've lost a lot of that, but we've become a lot more productive. I feel like also because the shift from becoming a leader to like from student to a leader has been really different because you learn a lot more that like you realize that you don't know as much as you thought you did. Like with as a student, you're still learning stuff and then you're still interacting with your leads.
Mhm.
But with becoming a leader, there's a lot more stuff that you have to do independently. And you realize that maybe you don't know this as much as you thought you did.
Right. Yeah, and I guess one of the experience I'm obviously one of the leads for our imagery team. One of the issues I've had is just every week it's hard to find kind of it's just really fatiguing, to go in and try to
Yeah.
lead a team. And I know that sometimes participation can be an issue. So this is less about the mini bot really, but how have you guys been promoting participation online? I've had an issue with that for sure, and I'm always looking for new ideas and new ways to keep people interested.
I wouldn't necessarily say I was the leader of the mini bot building. That was definitely Garthic's role, our CAD lead. But I did notice that there was a lot of communication going on in like DMs or Discord servers, which we basically spamming each other until we did the work. Like because it's all online, you can't go yell at someone or tell them kindly face to face or bribe them with like candy. You now just have to be persistent online in trying to get people to work. I like it seems really bad, but because we're all kind of like bros, so to speak, spamming each other is kind of the norm. Sometimes we'll do it over games, but now that it's been allowed to be focused more on productive materials, I think the bond that we've created is really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. So, no, yeah, so with like my group, with my like mini bot, one of the things that I like to do is call on people and ask what they think that we should code, what feature we should implement, because I feel like that really like helps people like get more comfortable with being on the spot with like coding, and even if they get a wrong answer, it's completely fine because everyone's still learning.
Interesting. So yeah, you talked about what games you guys used to play? Like, do you guys kind of play it as a sub team, or was it just oh, you're talking about like in the preseason, kind of playing games stuff like that? Yeah, I just remember I just one of the random days in imagery we just decided for whatever reason to play CS:GO. Our other other imagery lead, one heck of a CS:GO player. So we actually did 2-1. I don't know why I brought it up, but it was just really interesting to talk about. Yeah, it's kind of stemming back from what I was talking about earlier. You mentioned that you guys, um, when you were learning, you went through kind of different drivetrains, right? And eventually, obviously, our team now uses Swerve. So, you want to kind of talk about why we've ended up using Swerve on the Minibot, even though it's kind of an off-season project, and kind of what are the advantages of using Swerve on something this small? And is it for driving practice? Is it just for just for the building practice, things like that?
Having been on the drive team, I think it's really important for drive practice, especially since it seems really hard to use swerve when it comes to driving. And when trying out, I kind of failed. So the fact that Delaney can operate it so well is really awesome. Also, when it comes to swerve specifically for the minibot and mechanical, I think it's good that we have more practice with swerve drives because undoubtedly they're easier to build than West Coast strain drives, and then they're also easier to CAD. But in the same right, the more familiar we are with this kind of drive, the faster we'll be able to swap it on and off. And last year, or like the year before, when we were on the field, it pretty much only two members were able to easily swap it on and off, like fluently or as if they were experienced. Now that I think
Mhm.
more members are familiar with how it looks on CAD, it should become much faster once we go back in person.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
good. Oh, good.
Yeah, so definitely. Also, with like the programming side of things, yeah, it's really important because the way that Swerve works is really different from every other drive. Like each drive has a very different way of working, and because like Swerve changes its we can turn 360 degrees, while Mechanism drives can only go diagonal. Omni wheels can only go right and left, forward and backwards, and then Take drives can only go forward and backwards. So each drive has a very different implementation. So like being able to code using Swerve allows the new members to gain the experience that they will need to be able to create working code in the future.
Right. And so I know that Jack in the Bot, team 2910, they've had a lot of experience with Swerve, and they're kind of known to be some of the best in this area with Swerve. Are there any lessons you guys have kind of learned from them through the years? How to optimize it. I know that their autonomous their autonomous system is just mesmerizing. Sometimes during competitions, they just nail the accuracy. So yeah, I was wondering, are there any lessons you've learned from them, or are you trying to get to their level in a sense?
I don't think I've interacted with any of the Jack in the Bot people, but I
Mhm.
do know for a fact that one of their either build leads or programming leads was the one who was driving the bot. And I think what we can learn from that is that the more experience you have with the bot, whether it be through coding, programming, catting it, the more ready you'll be for the build season, the more ready you'll be for the future. And especially with something as what seems as complex or as simple as Swerve, um, we really need to, as a team, to become more used to it and thus this online learning that we've gone through is actually pretty helpful.
Yeah, is there
Yeah.
anything programming is done, learned from? I remember last year during, the only competition we really had, we actually asked Jack about, some of the settings that they use in their programming, like all the constants and things like that. So I was wondering, is there anything we've learned from them on the programming side?
Yeah. So sadly, I haven't interacted much with Jack and Bob either. I've
Mm.
interacted a little bit, but it was mainly our programming lead from last year communicating with their lead, and we've learned a lot about how to incorporate Swerve and some different ways we can use Swerve. And so, like, I feel like we're trying to get on their level, but we're also trying to communicate with them to, like be a lot more like open with them about like how they incorporate stuff and everything, so that we can gain the experience as well.
So yeah, I guess just kind of stemming off that again. Swerve drivetrain, you guys think it's kind of the new thing, in FRC? Is that something you guys imagine most teams shifting to in the future, or is it kind of a niche thing? I know that a lot of younger teams, I get, have a difficulty with implementing, building with Swerve. And so, yeah, what do you guys think? Is it the next big thing in FRC?
I think in like video games, it's definitely the meta, but for the newer teams, they're of course they might not have as much funding, or their mentors might not be as experienced, and so while it is the meta for everyone else and pretty, it seems like it's going to be implemented wide scale because we've seen it used in maps where it seemed like Swerve would not be the most optimal, but Swerve turned out to be the most optimal. We learned that Swerve requires a lot of experience. The newer teams will have a harder time implementing it, but they will eventually get to implementing it. And once pretty much everyone adopts it, we'll all pretty much be on the same level for that.
Interesting. Yeah, and I know that WPI lib has been, or if anybody doesn't know, any of our listeners don't know what WPI lib is, it's the standard library that FRC or FIRST provides. And so I know that they've implemented Swerve, parts of the Swerve drivetrain and all that into the code. So, what do you think that FRC, or sorry, what FIRST can still do to improve that, documentation wise or implementation wise? And how do you see, you know, other teams working with Swerve drive code in the future?
Yeah. So right now I feel like WPI is getting better. There's still some issues with like some features might not be as optimal as you would like them to be, and some features are a little bit harder to implement, and they're confusing when you implement them. But as we go on into the years, I feel like WPI is starting to iron all of that out, and more teams are starting to use Swerve. Like I agree with Julie, where there are advantages and disadvantages to Swerve, where like it's harder to implement, especially code wise. But like once you have the experience, like we're lucky to be a team that has Swerve experience and has like people who've gone through like building their own Swerve like system. So like once you do have like those members that have Swerve experience, then you can really start to grow and build onto that.
Interesting. So yeah, are there any? I mean, beyond just the init, the difficulty getting started, is there any? Can you imagine any future issues that teams might have with Swerve beyond just getting started with it? Are there issues with possibly speed, or I know obviously it's very versatile, but are there any issues that you can imagine that Swerve has compared to other drivetrains?
I think during the Stronghold challenge, Swerve wouldn't have been the best. I definitely was not there. I didn't watch any of the competitions, but
Hmm.
from like knowing the fact that the map is really bumpy, and then there are some choppy parts that bots will have difficulty going over, um, Swerve Drive would be really disadvantageous there simply because it's going to have to go over a bunch of bumps. Swerve drives break relatively easily compared to the other drivetrains, and that's where we would probably see like an upset in what normally would be built. Because if we see FRC come out with more games that alter more towards the terrain changes rather than the scoring based changes, then we're more likely to see a change in what the Swerve drive is going to be. Also, because swerve drives are expensive and because teams are using really good motors for swerve drives, the fact that they can be broken so easily and are so expensive is one of the larger issues that I would say surrounding it, on the mechanical side.
Interesting. Yeah, is there anything similar in programming? I know that programming is a little different, but what do you think?
Yeah, so with programming, it is a little bit different because we don't necessarily worry about how breakable it is. But I foresee like with a lot of like train changes and stuff like that, the implementation of Swerve will definitely need to change a lot.
Hmm.
uh, Especially because we use a PID controller for detecting like where we want to go, and we don't necessarily always keep in mind any of the terrain changes that we might face, like any of the bumps and stuff like that. And that it's definitely something that we are going to have to pay a lot more attention to, and definitely with the implementation, which is going to be harder. Like, how would we know when we're hitting a bump, when we're about to hit a bump, and stuff like that?
Interesting. Yeah, I can definitely imagine. Nice thing about it being on imagery, I don't really have to worry as much about those aspects of Swerve. I find it really fascinating just seeing every year as Swerve gets, it seems really innovating, finding new ways to implement it. I think it's really cool that people are taking something that somebody had just built and then just running away and finding new ideas to implement it. So um, I guess this is more of a yeah. Oh, okay. Uh, I think that this is a different kind of question, but what's something that you guys were looking forward to this season that can't happen? Like, or is there any specific like ideas or plans you guys had for the robot that won't happen, or is there anything like that?
I feel like this year's robot, now that we've kind of fully moved away from wood, is was one of the strongest robots that this team has produced. And so, because it was so strong and we weren't able to really play it through its full potential or polish out the little bumps within the bot, we're missing out on a lot of the potential that the bot held. And then there's also the community factor because I really do miss meeting in person and all the fun and learning that came from that.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. I also miss like the community factor, but I also miss the competitions because they're really fun. Like you get a more sense of like not just the community within our team, but generally the first community, and how everyone like really supports each other and how everyone's trying to grow from each other and learn from each other. I really was looking forward to like experiencing more of that, but we can't sadly because of coronavirus.
Right. And so, just touching on wood, I know that personally, I've always loved how we've used wood in the past. I just think it kind of helps us always stand out. What do you think the role of wood is going to be in the future of our team? I know that's a little hard to say right now. Last year we used just wood paneling. This is a reminder, but do you think we'll completely go away from it, or do you think that it'll somehow still play a part in our identity as a team?
I'm pretty sure we'll keep the decorative parts because definitely the names of the bots have always been linked to some form of wood. Um, I don't think on a practical level we'll implement wood because it's much easier to be destroyed. More and more teams are moving to metal or starting off with metal, making it much harder to try and bring back wood. But I see absolutely no reason why we should remove the paneling or remove the artistic element that wood has brought to the bot.
Right. Yeah, that's really the unfortunate reality, I guess. I've seen that, a lot of our old robots, they were made of wood. They had a hard time going through the end of the season, actually, staying completely together. And so, dang, I had a question in mind. I completely forgot about it. Um, Sorry about that. Right, it was actually what's an element of the game that you guys are looking forward to seeing next year? Is there any kind of I know everyone loves the idea of water game, but is there any other elements that you would love to see in next year's map? I know this is a bit different from the mini bot that we originally talked about, but I think it's a cool question to ask.
I really think that the scoring is going to be a big part because we did shooting for pretty much 2 years, and then I seen the block stacking, which I wouldn't say is as fun as the shooting factor. So I hope that shooting stays fun. And then there's also the fact that we have a really good defensive driver on our team. So if we could have a game that could implement defense, where I could just sit back and not do anything, and Delaney can hard carry us, I think, I mean, besides the fact that she's really strong, I feel like the defensive element of a game is always fun to watch out for, because there's always a streamlined vision of the game that first has, or a streamlined vision that some high scoring teams may have. And I feel the opportunity of teams that just have their swerve drive or just have their drivetrain can basically have their own importance on the field when it comes through defense.
Yeah, definitely. I also feel like what would be cool is if there were like different scoring elements throughout, not just shooting, but like different challenges as well. They're like as fun as shooting. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but like something that like is a little bit different, but incorporates the same like fun ability.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I remember defense. I found that really just fascinating because last year's game they had just a lot of rules around defense, and last year was the first year I've been on FRC, so I can imagine previous years defense has just really been a more of a last resort than an actual game plan, right? So, do you have any ideas of how you think defense will kind of play a part? Do you think that it'll largely be, bumping into other robots, or do you think there'll be more advanced techniques involved? I know programming, it's a little bit difficult to answer that question, but maybe on the mechanical side, what do you think?
Yeah, they've implemented a lot of rules. I think defense has a lot of potential. Of course, right now it's not supposed to be a stake of the game, and pretty much everyone envisions themselves as a scoring robot that then goes to complete the end game. But if it is possible for first to introduce kind of like a role on the team for a defense bot, especially since we've seen last year that we've played with 2 defense bots and 1 scoring bot, then basically a whole new level or kind of gameplay is introduced. And on the mechanical side for defense, I feel like I don't think there's going to be a lot of bumping, simply because of one, how are you going to moderate that? How are you going to say this is too much bumping or too little bumping to count as bumping? And two, when it comes to like the rules that we've seen in the past years, it's always been, this is the area you cannot cross, you cannot enter it, or when someone's doing something you cannot interrupt them. I feel like those are really good rules to have, especially since if a bot is in the middle of shooting and then you're just going to go ram into them, not only are you going to cause destruction to your own bot, you're also going to destroy their bot, and then you're also going to completely ruin the flow of the game and cause a big mess for the refs.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think that if you take a look probably through the years, you can probably find progression of how defense has changed. Personally, I'm not entirely sure because I just haven't had that experience, but I completely agree with you. There needs to be a way to moderate defense while also keeping it, a significant part of the game. Any comments on that, Mahir?
Yeah, so I definitely agree that, but I do feel like, especially last year, I haven't watched much games of previous years, but like teams were really careful about like even with defense, like not ramming into the robots as well, and I feel like that's really nice. Like even though there weren't very explicit rules against like necessarily bumping people, especially when they're in the middle of shooting like midfield, but people were still cautious about that and making sure that like they were still graciously professional while playing.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I play football, as you guys know, and in something like football, hitting is the norm, and obviously in something like robotics, it really isn't. So I think finding a really good balance is something I look forward to seeing in the future. Unfortunately, this is my last year in robotics, but in college, I hope to really take a look at the competition in the future, things like that. So as we kind of wrap up this episode of the podcast, I guess one of the final questions I have to ask you guys is, uh, what are you guys excited to look forward to for this year's competitions? I know that there's several of them, but our team is specifically competing in, I believe it was the Game Design Challenge and the Innovation Challenge, I want to say. Sorry, I haven't.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, yeah, what are you guys excited about in those two challenges, and how have you guys kind of found a role in those?
I know for a fact Mahir's in innovation and I'm in game design. But for game design, I feel like I'm really looking forward to the different ideas for scoring that we've come up with. the possibilities are pretty much endless at this point, since the only limitation being that you have to implement some form of a chain. But because we're all online, because it's so much easier to contact and organize instead of having a certain set time and date, you're allowed to constantly message someone or set up a random meeting in case you want to smooth something over. The essentially workflow has been smoothed out and working is now much easier, as well as collaborating on off hours.
I guess I'm here. If you want to talk about, 1 second. Wait, you were talking about the game design. So you want to just kind of restart a little bit?
Yeah. So about game design, I feel like there are a lot of possibilities for the scoring elements that we can use, especially with the flexibility in the end game and the beginning. While we all have the ability to basically choose what element we're going to focus on, the key aspect will eventually be chains, and that's what's I feel is going to be the most interesting, especially looking at what other teams propose, being that there are only so many people in Saints Robotics and only a few people are working on game design. There aren't that many ideas for chains as of now, but the creativity that everyone brings to the table is something I definitely look forward to.
All right, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm here if you want to talk about Innovation Award. I know that's something you've been working on. Or sorry, Innovation Challenge. My bad. Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm really looking forward to is actually implementing this into our community. Right now, we're still trying to get a baseline of like what our problem is and like what our solution is going to look like. But right now, I'm really think that what we're doing is really great because we were able to send out a survey to our like high school to get like to see like what sort of things would they be interested in, what issues are they facing. And I feel like that's really cool, and I'm looking forward to talking with some experts as well, getting their opinion on how we can actually implement some of the feedback that we get from our high school into a working innovation challenge that really has a really big impact.
Wow, that's really yeah, that's awesome. I actually filled out that survey and I really like the questions you guys asked on it. I hope that a lot of people get back to you guys and talk about that.
Yeah.
But it's been a really great episode. Getting to talk with you guys about the mini bot and really just a variety of topics. And so just kind of as we close out, I just want to let any of our listeners know if you guys are interested in being on the podcast, feel free to email us at roboticsassemblepodcast@saintsrobotics.com. It is quite the long email. I have talked to people getting it shortened down. I will get it shortened down eventually to podcast@saintsrobotics.com. But for right now, it's roboticsassemblepodcast@saintsrobotics.com. But yeah, thank you guys again for being on the show. And this is the first time we've actually recorded on a weekday. So I hope I didn't take up too much of you guys' time. And good luck for you guys this season. I am really excited to see what programming mechanical teams you guys do. I know that in years past, it's just really been a great mesh between the two, and the way we've worked together has kind of just brought together our team as a whole. So really looking forward to seeing that this year as well as next year. So yeah. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you guys on our next meeting. Sounds good. Thank you.
You too.
Yeah. Thank you for having us on the podcast.
All right. Thank you.